At this point, I would like to move on to our first lecture, which will be given by the Associate Professor Jitka Vysekalová. Be my guest. Thank you. In my lecture, I will mainly talk about emotions, and I would like to start with the motto, everyone knows what emotion is, until asked to give a definition. What I mean by this is that the views on emotions have been developing throughout the whole evolution of mankind according to the degree of knowledge. The relationship between rational and non-rational motivation for human action has been one of the central themes of ancient thought. Let us take the example of Plutarch, who said, "For emotions to be truly removed, many people would have an inactive and numb mind, like the helmsman when the wind stops blowing." And although the rational view on emotion was understandably prevalent at the time, we can see that emotions were valued very highly. To this day, there is not a single definition of emotion, but we can hopefully agree that it is indeed a complex phenomenon involving feelings, experiencing, and behavior, and that this phenomenon is accompanied by physiological functions. I personally like the paradigm of emotions of the psychologist Milan Nakoniečný, who emphasized the somatic, behavioral, and experiential function of emotions. What is important, however, is the emotional impact on our cognitive processes. From sensory processes to perception, memory, learning, and so on. The basic condition is that the intensity of the stimulus must be above the perceptual threshold. And it is equally important that the recipient is sufficiently activated. He should not be in a state of inhibition. But on the other hand, the activation shouldn't be too great because the recipient then goes into a state of exhaustion, and therefore the effect is not correct. When considering stimuli thresholds, it is important that we distinguish the difference between those stimuli. And this is especially important in advertising, where we engage all the sensory modalities: the sight, hearing, smell, touch, and so on. From the psychological point of view, we mainly focus on the effect of colors, but we of course also pay attention to the acoustic images that we use in advertising, because they too affect cognitive processes and emotions. As an example, I would like to mention the effect of music in shops. So music not only adds to the atmosphere, but also influences our perception of time. If the music is nice, we tend to spend much more time somewhere than we actually estimate. Many studies have shown that we perceive the time when waiting somewhere with music playing as much shorter than somewhere without music. And one of the research has even shown that if the music is playing faster, people actually move faster. And another research, but I'm not sure if it has been repeated, also showed that the faster the music played in a restaurant, the faster people ate. Our perception is also influenced by individual factors. It always depends on what we expect, what motivates us. It depends on our past experiences, because all of that influences what we expect. When perceiving, we should be wary of illusions, because misperception can cause quite a lot of problems. Let's look at a textbook example. Which of those lines looks longer to you? And of course, it depends on the context and on the effect of context. Now we are looking at two identical pieces of bread, depending on where they're placed. But it also depends on the path of the eye, what we are looking at, what the task is. Whether it's a loose observation where the eye only blinks, or whether we give a task like guess the age. Or we can give a nonsensical task, guess the last time they had visited that place. And then of course, the eye oscillates back and forth because it's an impossible task to accomplish. And in the same way, we can analyze the eye movement when perceiving advertisements. Attention is equally important because with the amount of information we have today, we should only allow a limited amount of that information to affect us. Our attention can be distracted by many things. Now we are looking at the text that is written partially in blue and partially in black. Now, try to read the black text as quickly as you can, and you will realize how distracting it is. Even though it's unrelated, that you must pay attention to leave out the text in blue. There is also a very close link between memory and emotion. On the one hand, emotions influence the activity and functioning of memory, but memory, on the other hand, is involved in the emergence of emotions. Our memory contains information that has the same emotional charge, and we all know from personal experience that we are more likely to remember things that have affected us emotionally than the neutral ones. Now, we will try to remember something to brighten our mood. I'll play you some slides. Of course, you don't have to shout. Just please think about whether you see a cat or a dog, both, neither, or if you're not sure. Now, I'll play those 12 slides again, and I would like to ask you to identify whether or not the images have appeared on the previous slides. The images will change every 2 seconds. And this time, please try to say out loud whether yes or no. So, which slides did you find easier to remember? Obviously, the ones that were somehow different from the others, the ones that touched our emotions in some way. We probably don't see a cat in a hamburger very often, do we? So let's see what role emotions play in the communication process. They are, of course, an extremely important point in all communication within society, and their importance is even bigger with the information overload that we are currently experiencing. Even though communication tools are changing, communication in the so-called new media also plays an important role. And I think it's important to link online and offline communication because that is how we can achieve greater efficiency. There's a correlation that emotions arise from communication processes, and at the same time, they are a part of elements of communication. In contemporary communication, we see an emphasis on personalization, the direct targeting of a specific group of people. I will once again mention the success of social networks, at least in some target groups, which is based on the desire to share something. So, basically, on socialization. The second thing is that it sometimes gets into positions that are not entirely desirable. However, one thing people want, despite all the changes, are experiences. Not everyday things, but a certain social capital that we gain through those experiences. As I mentioned before, emotions are both a result and a part of the communication process, and they are an important part of advertising in order to influence our target audience. So, what emotional appeals do we mainly use? The answer is that it's fear, humor, eroticism, and warmth. Let's start with the motive of fear. Ethically or psychologically, we should not use it because it depends on the intensity of the fear we create. And if the fear we create is too big, we are more likely to discourage than encourage someone. But we can use the feeling of tension because it activates attention, but we should not overdo it, of course. Let's say, what's the neutral or the natural reaction to fear? People freeze or run away. And that's usually not what we want to achieve with our advertising. We have to offer a way out. If you do this, this will happen. So, for example, if you buy our deodorant, all the ladies will like your smell and they won't be able to resist you. Fear also has a justification in social campaigns because such campaigns appeal to responsibility, a sense of security, family, and the pain of losing our close ones. I don't know if in Slovakia, but in Czech Republic we had a campaign, You Don't Think, You Pay. A campaign without fear. Now, we are looking at a pack of cigarettes where I find this issue problematic. So it's a campaign that was mainly meant to be aimed at young people so they wouldn't start smoking. And if we take them as the target group, I doubt they would be put off by these scary images. On the other hand, they might just be attracted because, young people tend to like being different or extravagant. But unfortunately, I don't have any research to back that up. Now let's proceed to humor. That's another thing. We know that it activates attention, promotes brands, promotes remembering. But we should probably be aware that we can rarely influence the persuasion process with humor. And most importantly, we have to choose the appropriate type of humor. So, humor is not suitable for every product or service. Although I have to say that there has been some research during the pandemic period when these humorous ads have been perceived very positively. So we can choose humor that is sentimental, humor that is satirical, humor that comments on certain current events, whether they are social or political. And I really like this black humor, which I probably don't need to explain further. At a certain period in the Czech Republic, I don't know about Slovakia, all the banks decided to persuade us with humor. And humor was most striking in the ad of the Air Bank, which continues to use such ads up to this day. The other banks simply let go of these tactics and went back to their traditional presentation. The soft drink Coca-Cola had a lot of funny commercials, especially those that targeted children. In September, an advertisement using a well-known personality was launched in the Czech Republic. And there are many similar advertisements. I'm certain that the same thing happens in Slovakia as well. That famous people represent brands. In our case, it was the actor Lajos Mareš. And finally, we got to the erotic motives. As with humor, we should be aware of the so-called vampire effect. Humor itself, a story in an advertisement or some erotically tinged image that catches the eye, can overpower the advertisement itself. Thus, even if people like it and have a positive attitude towards it, they don't know what the brand is about. It happened here in Czech Republic. I don't know if you know Bobik. It was the most popular commercial even a few years after it wasn't running on TV anymore. We did a representative survey and we found that 80% of people didn't know what brand it was. And when it comes to the acceptance of such advertising, it depends on the level of acceptance of erotic and sexual motives in society. In our research, which I told you about at the beginning, we are looking at the appropriateness of sexual and erotic themes in advertising. People are given the opportunity to say whether they like the ad pretty much always and everywhere, whether they like it in relation to the product, which is about 1/3 of the population acknowledges, whether they don't like it, but it doesn't really matter to them. And one of the possibilities is that extreme position, no, this advertising should be banned. Here I have to say that people are tolerant, and the last survey earlier this year showed that only 4% of people would ban such ads. Of course, there are also people who don't like them, but they don't feel that the ad should be banned because of them. Here's an even more innocent ad from the 90s where the ad adapts to the product. It's a classic example of eroticism in advertising. Here's the ad that made people angry. Not that the act itself is bad, but the slogan was quite over the line and inappropriate. It got to the ethics committee for advertising and the ad was removed. But not only women are depicted in those poses, as you can see, men are as well. In the Czech Republic for 10 years until 2018, there was a competition called Sexist Little Pig, which drew attention to sexist advertisements. I picked out sex in political campaigns during the last election in 2014 because almost all parties used sexual motives. This was the campaign of the political party Social Democracy Top 9, and I'm not sure who this would appeal to. You know that the right place is right here. And then there is also linguistic sexism. In this year's election, there was no sex in the ad campaigns anymore, but we could see emotion because the Civic Democratic Party used the emotion threat. Their opponents were portrayed as devils with red background, while they were always blue and everything would turn out beautifully. And finally, warmth in advertising, which includes a wide range of very positive feelings such as trust, tolerance, friendship, a sense of security. That is what we most often encounter. I think one of the best examples is the soft drink Coca-Cola's commercial. When you love it, nothing else matters. And of course, Christmas is a time when we get emotional in advertising, and it doesn't happen only here, it happens pretty much everywhere. Children and animals. The use of national traditions, although here it was a bit problematic because although the ad itself was good, it was used by the supermarket Kaufland, which is not of Czech origin, and people were actually bothered by it. November saw the launch of the Taste We All Love campaign, which is motivated by and aimed directly at certain foods of the region. We feel a sense of belonging. You know that I'm doing something for my region, community feeling. Landscape, traveling, monuments. As I was saying, a warm attitude means positive feelings, love, friendship, and it can affect the recipient in a positive way and hopefully their purchase as well. This year, the company Kantar did a global research over the last 7 years, a reaction to about 200,000 ads using facial coding, where it showed that humorous ads worked even during the pandemic. But recently, ads have globally caused more negative emotions. However, this is not yet the case of the Czech Republic, where positive emotions still prevail. Now a few words on neuromarketing from the perspective of communication and emotions. So, is it really an all-powerful tool to help us get to know the consumer? Let's take a look at one example of neuroanalysis, which I borrowed from my colleague Ondrej Herring. If anyone would like to learn more, I have put his contact information here. It's an analysis of the Nespresso ad, wouldn't change a thing. And we measured two levels. The emotional polarity, which shows the emotional charge, or more simply put, if the person likes it or not, and emotional activation, or the deeper meaning, that shows the impact on motivation, or again, more simply, if the ad motivates or not. On the chart, you can see two polarities. Blue is like, dislike, and emotional activation is red. Let's see what it all means. So, which moments cause the activation? When a well-known popular actor appeared there. And although there were only a few negative polarities, where did they appear? So as soon as the woman he was supposed to seduce appeared, there was quite a disappointment. We learned it from the following interview that people were expecting a beautiful model, and this was a nice and pleasant lady, but nothing that was expected in relation to that actor. And then the aggression. which mostly evokes negative emotions. It was the scene when the gorillas pounce on the actor and where the negative emotions occur. So that's where the negative emotions occur. But then again, it goes into positive values because Clune appeared, he survived, and there's a very good connection to the product, which is related to the happy ending. Hence, it was evaluated positively. However, from a rational point of view, if anyone discussed it in detail, there were some strange things in that ad. But let's just not focus on that right now. From my point of view, it's very important that when we use neuromarketing methods, we must pay great attention to their interpretation, because the methodology alone doesn't tell us everything. And I'm in favor of combining methods, and each method should be followed by an in-depth interview. We could say there has actually been a small revolution in brain research that is coming to the conclusion that emotions dominate our thinking and that it is important that these emotions are positive ones. We also know that the proportion of decision making only based on subconscious motives is estimated around 70 to 90%, so of course it's important to address this issue. The neuropsychological segmentation based on limbic types is also interesting. I think it was done by Husserl, but of course to explain these different types he used examples from Germany. He also says that it is important to know how the emotional mind works and that we shouldn't wait for the customer to express their wishes, but we should rather try to meet them halfway. But of course, there is no magic button for it, but we can try to discover the deeper emotional personality of the customer. Emotional amplification is important as a strategic start because only emotions give value and meaning to what we decide. So brands that evoke no emotions are worthless to the brain because that value only arises in our consciousness. The current study by the firm Ipsos shows that there is a direct link between emotional bonding and the development of the business index, the so-called growth potential indicator. Emotionally attached customers, so those who have a strong emotional bond with the company, are 2 times more likely to buy something than those who were not that much satisfied. The study is available online. These are the individual numbers. For emotionally fulfilled needs, the likelihood of them buying the product is 84%. For recommendation to acquaintances, 71%. And where the needs are not fulfilled, the numbers, of course, decrease. So, what will the customer of the future be like? Will he be completely different? In some ways, we are still the same. We are still fascinated by extraordinary experiences, we are subject to emotions, we want to be special, and that is still true. In addition to doing new media, we should probably focus more on the customer because there we can see an increased segmentation. To conclude, I would like to share another quote with you. Doesn't know what harbor he's making for, no wind is the right wind. So we should know exactly what we want. Thank you for your attention.